Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to break down a really pointed legal opinion from law professor Bipin Adhikari, and it's all about the high-profile case involving the Nepali political figure Rabi Limachani.
And he starts with this really powerful claim. I mean, think about it. Justice itself is in detention. What could possibly lead a respected law professor to say something so startling? That's the real question here, and we're going to unpack his argument.
All right, so to really get our heads around his reasoning, we're going to follow his argument through 5 key sections. We'll start with the whole question of detention and work our way all the way to his final, pretty big conclusion about the justice system itself. Okay, let's jump right in. The professor's whole critique starts with a really fundamental question. Why is Rabi Limachani being held in jail before he's actually been convicted of anything?
So first things first, the professor reminds us that pre-trial detention, holding someone before there's even a verdict, is supposed to be a really serious, extreme measure. It's not supposed to be the default. It's an exception, saved for very specific situations.
And for a court to actually deny someone bail, the prosecution usually has to prove one of 4 standard risks. They have to show the person might flee the country, or that they could tamper with evidence, or maybe intimidate witnesses, or that they're a genuine threat to society.
So the really crucial question becomes, do those justifications actually hold up here? And the professor's whole argument is that the prosecution has really failed to make a convincing case for any of them.
And this is where he systematically just takes each justification apart. His counter-arguments basically ask, where's the proof? Is there any real basis to think he'd flee? What specific evidence could he even destroy? Who exactly could be intimidated? His core point is that without solid answers to these questions, that really high legal bar for pretrial detention just hasn't been met.
All right, so after questioning the whole basis for detention, his critique moves on to the charges themselves. And here, he argues there's a really fundamental problem with how they've been applied in the first place.
He argues there's this massive difference between what might be cooperative fund mismanagement and the much more severe charge of organized crime. In his view, the first one requires proving there was actual criminal intent. But the second one? He claims it's been tacked on almost as a tactic, mainly as a way to justify keeping him in jail without bail.
So, what does organized crime actually mean in legal terms? Well, it's a lot more than just a crime that involves a few people. The law is very specific. It talks about a structured criminal group with a coordinated purpose, usually something involving shared profits, violence, or corruption. So, using that legal definition, almost like a checklist, the professor argues that these essential elements are just missing from the prosecution's case file. He claims there's no evidence of a structured group, no coordinated plan to commit a crime, and no system for sharing profits.
So he's not just critiquing the prosecution's case. He's also highlighting what he sees as a totally different path forward, one that he argues is already built right into Nepali law, but seems to be getting ignored.
He points to a very specific provision in Nepal's Cooperative Act, Section 131A, and argues that it provides a formal way to handle exactly this kind of situation.
And this act outlines a really clear 2-step process for reconciliation. Step 1. The accused repays the money that was misappropriated to the cooperative members. And Step 2, if that happens, the case can actually be settled, the charges dropped, and even any sentences canceled.
And this quote really gets to the heart of his argument. He's saying the main goal of the law, its primary objective, is to make sure the savers get their money back. It's not just about imposing harsh punishments.
And finally, the professor insists that you just can't understand the legal arguments fully without also looking at the political context surrounding this entire case. He presents this not as some kind of political opinion, but as a critical fact you have to consider. Rabi Limachani isn't just a private citizen, he's a prominent opposition leader. And according to the professor, that fact alone changes the entire dynamic of the case.
And this quote really drives that point home. In his view, you just can't separate the legal proceedings from this political reality. He suggests that the seriousness of the approach here, especially the decision to keep Limachani in detention, has to be evaluated with that context in mind.
So when you take everything together, his analysis of the detention, the charges, the legal alternatives, and the political context, it all builds toward the professor's really provocative final conclusion.
He actually uses a specific Latin legal term to label the case, causa ficta. And what that means is essentially a fake or an artificial case. Now, for a law professor to call a case fabricated, that is a pretty stunning assessment of its legal foundation.
And so we're left with this really fundamental question that the professor poses. When a case raises so many doubts about the process, about fairness, about motive, the focus naturally starts to shift. It becomes less about whether one person is guilty or innocent, and more about the integrity and the credibility of the entire justice system. Is the system itself on trial? And that's a question really worth thinking about.